Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome indeed to today's Movers and Shakers virtual event. My name's Lee Natasha Salter, and I'm Managing Director for Movers and Shakers. Now, we've got over 800 people registered for today's event, which is excellent, and quite a few of our members from across the UK have signed up today, so a warm welcome to all of you. For those of you who are not members of Movers and Shakers and perhaps don't know about us, we're the UK's leading property networking forum. We've got over 25 years of experience in bringing together key players from the private and the public sectors and putting on first-class events. So obviously we've postponed at the moment our physical events, and we've created a series of virtual events for you all, which are free of charge. If you've missed any of our events, or indeed if you want to watch them again, please go to our YouTube channel and do subscribe. So this morning, today we've got a webinar on the topic of protecting housing delivery. What emergency measures and support mechanisms should the government be putting into place to safeguard future house building across the UK? Now, clearly, before lockdown, meeting our housing targets was a big challenge, as was delivering the right mix of tenure. But now with lockdown, with the sites shutting, and now potentially coming out of lockdown, what can we do to kickstart housing across the UK? What can we do to bring it back up to scale, what we really need? Is it going to be using more modern methods of construction, government incentives, financial incentives, changes to the planning system? Well, we've got what can only be described as a brilliant panel this morning, who I know will help us with some potential solutions and will help us put together the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. So welcome, first of all, to Councillor Darren Rodwell, who's of course leader of the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, Mark Farmer, who is the founding director and CEO of Consultancy, Killian Hurley, who is Chief Executive of Mount Anvil, Michela Hancock, Managing Director of Greystar, and our chair today, Karen Cooksley, who is partner at Winckworth Sherwood. Thank you to you all for joining us. Now, the session today is 45 minutes long. Karen, of course, will be chairing and fielding the questions. There's also an opportunity for you as an audience to ask questions. If you go to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, click on and you can ask a question. Karen and the panel will be able to see this, and they will try to answer as many as they can during this discussion. Okay, I'm going to leave you now in the capable hands of Karen and our panel. Enjoy, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to see you all. And I thought that what we do, first of all, is ask each of you just to give a very brief insight on the impacts that lockdown has had on your organisation, particularly from the housing perspective, Darren. What do you see now as the biggest challenges? What do you need from other stakeholders and the government, national and local and regional? And I suppose one of the other things is, what do you need as understanding from the other stakeholders? What are your red lines? What can't you do? Because we're all going to be in this together. There's going to be an even greater need for collaboration. But there will be some things that are really very difficult for the different organisations from their own perspectives. Can I ask you to start, Darren? Can I congratulate you first of all on your special anniversary? Do you want to show us your T-shirt?
There you go.
Excellent.
Yeah. So it's been 10 years since we got rid of the fascists. That's what it's about. So
brilliant.
In housing terms, what do we need to do? Well, what we need to do is what I've been talking about, and I think Mark and the other panelists have been talking about for a while now, which is the sectors working together in a much more holistic way. Government, you say, is saying we're all in it together. I wish that was the case, or otherwise we wouldn't be fighting for the peanuts that we're getting, the scraps that government's giving us at the moment to run our local authorities. We are the fourth emergency service, and we should be respected as such. We run 365 days a year, and we're supporting every type of resident you can imagine. And that now needs to be into housing. Actually, this is now the Homes for Heroes, but the heroes this time are all the workers, not just key workers. They are as we had the Beacon Tree 100 years ago, we've got to think about a building programme that allows us to deliver housing at different needs, at different levels for rental, whilst giving the aspiration for people to be able to invest some into some equity, or if they're really, really lucky enough, they can then actually buy as well. But the truth of the matter is, the biggest problem we've got in the market today, the biggest problem we have in London today, is enough housing for people to rent that they can truly afford. So we need government to understand the real issues and actually start talking to the sector and local government about how we fix the problems that we're facing today. Local government is probably the answer to bringing it all together. Planning should not be diluted just because it makes it easier for some people, because what it says to me is the cowboys will get away with more, and at the same time councils have to understand that they need to start thinking about how to bring together new housing development that works for the existing communities whilst delivering for new communities as well. And we're in London Council, so I head up London Councils for Housing and Planning. We're already doing that piece of work. Well, I'm talking to all the boroughs. I'm asking them what are their challenges respectively in their local borough, but what are the opportunities? There's a lot of sites that haven't been built out because the market says, you know, keep the supply shorter and the profits go up higher. Well, that's all well and good, except when you're in a crisis. And we're in a crisis now. And I keep saying to people, I live on the Beacon Tree estate, the first of its kind. If you try to recreate that estate today, you're talking about £16 billion. Now, government, don't give us the legislation, give us the tools and the finance to rebuild a society that we've seen over the last month, which is not one of Brexit and division, but one of the coronavirus, and actually where we look out for our neighbours, friends and family members. There's people I've spoken to in my street that I've never spoken to before, just to make sure that they're okay. And I'm a very welcoming man. So I think we've really got to get in touch with what's going on right now, which is saying everyone has a place in our society, but as a society and as a business, private, public sector, we need to make sure everyone has a home in society. And again, modern ways of construction is very much, in my opinion, a way of leading this, because we do not have the skill sets, and especially because of the age of our employment of the UK part of the industry, and then, you know, 2/3 are foreign nationals. People are still worried. I'm talking to people that have worked on our sites around here saying, I'm not sure if I still want to be here in 6 months' time when this is all calmed down. Are we still going to be bullied for being a foreign national? Again, there's some questions we've got to answer as well.
Thanks, Darren. Lots to think about there. Killian, could I come to you for some of a response to that? One of the things that I see in my day-to-day job is the lack of pace with planning, which I think is always one of the things that you struggle with as well, to understand why it takes so long to get planning permission. But what other incentives should what is quite an interventionist government for a Tory administration be giving to your sector?
Okay, thanks, Karen. I mean, just echoing Darren's comments there, planning should never be easy. It's too bloody important, but it should not be inefficient.
Great.
So, you know, to some extent, we actually get what we pay for in terms of planning.
Yep.
And no disrespect, Karen, but if you compare planning barristers, highly competent planning lawyers like yourself, what you earn compared
with the
to what we're
resource
paying
at local level, exactly.
At local level, it's crazy stuff. So we should invest in more resource. We should put long-term incentives in there, and planning should always remain difficult because it's too important. As regards government intervention, I think that's a real interesting one. And I echo some of what Darren says there. Came across something the other day that a civilized society should be judged by how well we treat the less well off. So the current Tory government, we had starter homes previously, you know, there's going to be all kinds of stuff coming out, which A, will distort the market, and B, doesn't help the people at the lower rungs of this sector. So if there is going to be a government windfall of money, it should go to local authorities and it should go to housing associations whose long-term interests align with the best long-term interests of London and the UK.
That's great. Michela, can I come on to you? Because a virtue of build to rent is that you can create, once you've got your planning permission, you've gone through your other regulatory processes, you can create places, more homes at pace in a different way from build to sale. But we've seen, haven't we, over the last few years, in many places, viability difficulties. What understanding do you need from the public sector to make that easier, and what other help should government be giving to your bit of the sector?
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. I think it's something we all discuss quite frequently around our office as well. Just wanted to say, I think there's a lot of positives around build to rent that I think sometimes aren't talked about. It does help deliver much needed housing stock, and it does diversify supply. It does, as you say, create communities, creates them faster, because the minute we deliver our build to rent homes, they're consistently leased up. So it does create a community. We also have on-site teams that manage our buildings and communities. So they're helping to create more of that community feel, doing events with the community and the residents together. So I just wanted to say that, because I think sometimes the conversation goes in a way that we forget the advantages of build to rent, and I think there are a lot of them. And I think, you know, we are focused on quality, we're listening to our customers, transparency of data, and really just being there. So I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about doing. I think there's, you know, there are a lot of shovel-ready projects right now, about 100 in the pipeline. So I think those are ready to be completed by 2021. And we need to really focus on resuming that delivery of build-to-rent units. It's critical, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of things that we could do to help that. I think, you know, you've already touched on it a little bit, Darren and Killian, but the planning support, I think more resource at a local level would be extremely helpful. And I think to have someone potentially that is a supporter of build to rent at the local level that can push these things and help with the planning reviews and generally help with the PPAs, I think that would help to streamline planning. I think it would really help with explaining the affordable housing components of build to rent on the discount market rent, including the London living rent, but explaining that that is an appropriate affordable tenure, because I think sometimes that gets lost in the conversation. And I think that would really help with viability. I think talking about removing the requirement of late stage reviews, I think that might be quite controversial, but it's very hard to agree on a transaction when you have investors, which most of us do, if you think it might change down the line. That's considered very high risk. So I think these are some of the things that we could talk about doing. I also think just continuing to expedite the delivery of build to rent, it would, and other residential projects, I think it would be helpful to talk about deferring SIL payments and Section 106 obligations to just a later timing, so that it could help kickstart the recovery and getting everyone back. And then I think also potentially revisiting consents on stalled schemes. Just if we could have more of the resource at the local level focused on build to rent, I think it would almost create like a task force that would help to do this and really push and maintain the pace of delivery. You know, I think we've made a lot of progress in the build to rent. And in London, we currently have, well, not at the moment, but without the shutdown, 16,000 units under construction, and we have 37,000 units in planning, which is a quite significant help towards reaching the London Plan's target goal of 42,000 homes a year. So anyway, I think I just wanted to really push on the.
Oh, that's great. That's really good.
Because I think sometimes it gets forgotten, and I think it's really important to acknowledge it.
You mentioned planning, and in particular Section 106 agreement SIL. In terms of SIL, there'd need to be a short piece of secondary legislation before it could be deferred. And I'm with apologies to those watching who are from other parts of the country. This is relevant. I just wanted to come back to Darren briefly before bringing Mark in, and say, is there an appetite for that kind of assistance, Darren, among the London boroughs? Willingness to engage, knowing they're going to be asked to engage with deferral of Section 106 payments, reduction of payments. A particular issue we're coming up against at the moment is where organisations have had to shut sites down when they fully expected to have substantially implemented planning permissions within a 2-year period, and now might miss that. What's the appetite for working together and assisting there?
Well, look, local government is always the convener of, as I said before, we are the glue that brings it all together. So whether we want to or not, it's whether we can afford to do it. And I think this is what the sector has to understand, and why we need your support to say to government, stop doing what you're doing. So let me give you an example. Coronavirus, at the moment, I got £6 million from the government in the first tranche of 1.6 billion. I then got £5.5 million from the second tranche of the monies, 1.6 billion. That equates across the piece of local government, we got 1% of what the private sector's been given to support industry. 1%. We're supporting the whole country. Yeah, we are the people that are making sure that people don't die. Yes, the frontline blue services are doing that at the immediate, but we're the people that take care of them afterwards. We're the people, I'm supporting 30,000 people a week to eat, to support in their mental health. So as much as I would want to come in and go, you know what, yeah, we can defer this and we can defer that, you can't defer it when I've been given £11.5 million, but the government's still expecting me to make another £12 million saving this year, despite the fact that I'm still doing all this additional work. Now, what we should be saying is, why is government not actually investing into proper infrastructure, so there isn't such an emphasis on the building family to have to pay all these different bits in the 106, the seal and everything else? Because actually that's the real problem. The real problem is government hasn't invested in housing in 40 years. And when I mean in housing, I mean all the infrastructure that goes along with housing. The doctor's surgeries, the community halls, the play areas. It just doesn't happen. And what happens is both sectors fight against each other. And what we need to do is say, well, look, if you want us to get the economy back and moving again, then this is what it's going to cost. This is what we can do as the public sector. And then this is what the private sector can do. And between us, we can start building a sector again that fits for every type of person. Because at the moment, and I've got no problem, we're doing build to rent in different guises. We work with the building rent. In fact, I've got a scheme with one of them where there's going to be 1,800 properties built on one site. So I'm not anti this, but the problem we've got is, how do we afford it? You know, we've been slashing all of our planning, we've been slashing, you know, all the support that we give generally. There's been no infrastructure investment in 40 years. The government's got away with it, both sides, no matter what side of the fence. Yeah, so what we actually need to do is have a proper adult debate about where our values are for a society we want to see. Because it can't be right that I'm worrying about 5,000 people that were rough sleepers. Some of those have been placed in my borough. and I've got to then find the money to try and support them because they never were from my borough. So there's a whole raft of questions, but we've got to get back to
new
the
things that
simple,
things that are being thrown up. Yeah,
absolutely. But we've got to get back to our values, and we've got to say collectively about what we want to see, because government can't argue with if all the sectors come together and line up together. Now, you know, I'll concede as well, some of my colleagues have got to learn that in local government. So we need to get our house in order. But the truth of the matter is, all sectors, all build types need to be accelerated, and we need government to give us the freedom and the finance to help the sectors do that, because that will unlock the wider economy.
That's great, thank you. And talking about acceleration, I'm going to come to Mark now as the guru of off-site manufacture. Is the situation in which we find ourselves, Mark, going to give a golden opportunity to drive modular forwards? Do you think that there is now the opportunity to do that in a way that we haven't before? I know you've written recently a new report. What forms of government support would you envisage helping so that all of the sector can deliver quicker, more?
Yes, so I think the answer to that, Karen, is I think there's a heightened awareness of the fragility of traditional construction. It's come out of this crisis. So lots of the issues that have arisen in terms of not necessarily the suspension of construction sites, but the way in which you reopen construction sites in line with social distancing regulations and restrictions has shown that labour intensity, which is at the heart of traditional construction, is a really fragile model. And it's one that's increasingly now going to be shown to be potentially a risk. And who knows what the future holds in terms of perhaps a return to restrictions in the future if we have issues with the virus taking hold again. So I think what's happening, certainly in my experience, even the last month or so, is that there's more and more questions being asked about how we might build a more resilient industry. Certainly for a new wave of projects coming forward, in terms of existing construction projects, they're all pretty much committed. So I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a fairly tough period of working through and completing projects with issues around loss of productivity, delays, all sorts of issues, and we have to approach that in a fairly pragmatic and measured way and avoid a whole heap of disputes and commercial tensions that wouldn't do anyone any good. But certainly for the future, I'm hopeful. A lot of what I've been talking about for the last few years in terms of modernising the method of how we deliver will be seen as part of the solution here. We need to overcome the reliance on site labour intensity. We need to overcome the really fragmented and fragile supply chains that we put together on every project, that all procured on lowest price. There's no real integrated thinking there, and there's no real loyalty to understanding how you maintain supply in a period of crisis. And I think from a government perspective, so what can government do in all of this? I think you've got to view this from a carrot and stick perspective, in my view. So you have options on the table around interventions. I think, as I've just said, you have industry, I think, working out for itself that it has to do things differently, which is a combination of both clients, advisors, and the supply chain thinking differently. But from a government's perspective, I think it's really important, if there's going to be a stimulus package on the other side of this, which there will be, and there'll be a sector-specific set of packages coming forward. For housing, we need to make sure we have a good recovery, not just any old recovery. So the worst thing in the world would be just government to chuck some money at the industry and do a whole load of unintelligent measures that perhaps stimulate demand or they support supply, but actually we don't get a better industry on the back of it. So the key themes for me would be things like using the decarbonisation agenda and the green agenda as a mechanism for driving better building and better designs. We clearly also have a real interest in fire safety. So using building regulation reform as a mechanism for driving better outcome quality should be at the heart of a stimulus package. Consumer quality and redress just the actual outcomes we're creating for consumers is really important. Planning reforms. So we have a housing white paper that was in process before this crisis hit. Wouldn't it be great if we could accelerate planning and link that to modern methods of construction by creating, type approval of different typologies that are factory manufactured and delivered. And lastly, probably public procurement needs to be overhauled, because we need to procure differently if we're going to procure better outcomes, and it shouldn't be about lowest price or highest land value. We've got to think differently, and if government can come up with a stimulus package embracing all of those things, then I think we'll get a good recovery.
Great. Killian, do you want to come back on some of those points?
I think I agree with all of what you say, Mark. Well, and listening to Darren, lads, government are going to do shag all potentially short term to help us out of this. There's so many demands, and Michela, listening to the build to rent stuff, I think, what are our priorities? And I'm speaking from a London perspective as a Londoner, but a foreign national, Darren, who falls into that older age or profile. So I'm highly at risk inside all of this. What are our priorities in London, where the housing crisis is greatest? And government intervention, provided it's targeted, Mark, is super. But we got to be clear, and Darren, that's where public-private sector should be working closer together. What are our priorities here? Is it the homeless? Is it the key workers? Is it the fire people? Is it the nurses? Because we cannot do everything, guys. If Hitler hadn't advanced on Russia, we'd all be speaking German today. So we got to limit our asks. And at Mount Anvil, we're looking internally. How do we collaborate better? How do we improve our listening skills? Mark, to take your point, how are we engaging better with our supply chain? So in April, we paid our subbies 8 days early. They didn't ask us, we just did it. And that's opening up a whole stream of conversations. And then bring in the modular, Mark, where it's appropriate. But our communication skills, guys, that's what we're working on. And that's our line, Mark, around modern methods of communication. 2 ears, one mouth. I'm not going to shut up.
Michela, would you like to come back on any of those points? Where are you on the MMC?
I would. I have a lot that I'd like to say to that. So to Darren's points, I completely agree with you on those challenges, and Mark as well on the MMC. We're working with modular a lot at Greystar in the UK. We're on our 4th project, actually building right now in Croydon with Tide Construction and Vision Modular. And actually that's the one construction project that actually didn't shut. The work was slowed, but it didn't actually shut. They were still able to use social distancing and continue working. So while it did slow, it didn't shut. So I think that's just an interesting example. All of the rest of our traditional sites did close. And I also think I definitely agree with you, Killian, as well, on working together. I think, we would all like to work together. Can't we try to work with the entire industry to say, let's ask for more release of public land, and then partner up together, say build to rent providers, affordable providers, and home builders together, and then create communities and deliver them as fast as we can with more help at the local level. So I think I fully agree with all of you. I understand your challenges, Darren. What is the solution? I think it's really trying to work together and not saying, it's one tenure is not the solution to the housing crisis. I think it is, as you say, everyone working together. And we really want to do that.
Darren, do you want to come back on that public land point?
Well, look, it's the easy one of saying, we're not releasing enough public land. You build out the 250,000 houses, flats that have been given planning permission in London, and not just London, other cities as well. We are, if we were waiting on planning, I would agree with that, but we're not waiting on planning. I can tell you, none of my sites shut over this period. They're still working. They're not working at the full capacity, but all of them are working. Why? Because I'm a local authority that knows I need housing. If you take what's in my borough alone, we've got planning. Planning's been given for over 20,000 homes. What today? Done. There. Go and build them. The fact of the matter is, though, the market doesn't allow it, because the market says we've got to make a profit. what we've got to do is say to the market, yes, you've got to have your piece of the cake. But the biggest problem we've had is 40 years of destroying council housing. And I say council housing, not social housing, because I'm not one of these that believe everyone should be paying the same price for the product that they have. It should, in my opinion, be based on what you get as an income. And I've always believed that. And I say that as an ex-single parent. I say that as someone who never got on the housing list. Yeah, I did shared ownership. I'm not bothered. I just want a home. And if we're really serious about sorting out the housing market, we've got to say what the no-nos are. We've got to have the right tools for local government to support the private sector. Local government needs to get its own house in order with some of its partners as well. But ultimately, yeah, we've got to understand that there's still the cowboys out there that we've got to deal with. And at the moment, we're the only council in the whole of the country that has a landlord scheme borough-wide. Ridiculous situation when we know there are people living in accommodation that just isn't fit for purpose or is so overcrowded. I totally agree with Mark on modular. How ridiculous that local government hasn't come up with this is the local modular system we're going to use collectively across London. It will absolutely innovate how we build. At the same time, it will bring the costs down, because if you've got 32 boroughs and we've all got programs that are fairly big, then actually it's a bit like the old Betamax and VHS and Video A. Yeah, it's about the marketplace. Well, we're the biggest players in the market, and we're coming back into the market, and we're going to work with our private sector partners. And some of that, sorry, that's one of my dogs. Some of that, you know, we'll leave to the private sector, but it's a massive cake. And we can't keep treading on each other's toes and blaming each other for the problems. And as I say, that's why I shook my head to the public land situation, because I'll just come back and go, you build out those 250,000 homes, then we can have a discussion about a shortage of land. The problem is the speculators that come in, buy the land, get planning permission, and then charge someone 4 times as much because they've got the planning permission. That's what we've got to outlaw, yeah? Because actually that is not helping the market. And it don't matter where you are in the UK. Sorry, it infuriates me, as you can tell. I'm just going to check my dog very quickly.
Okay. Mark, while dog is being checked, do you just want to come back on the public procurement angle? Because I think that's a really interesting point. And procurement within the private sector as well. Do you just want to go a little bit deeper into that and what your thoughts are there?
Yeah, so procurement is a hugely powerful mechanism if it's used well. And I think, unfortunately, in our industry, we've defaulted to the approach of just buying cheap or taking Darren's point, it's either about building cheap or buying land high, bidding up land. And actually, we need to reverse that in some respects in a controlled way that doesn't destroy the market or destabilize the market. You know, there is a need, and I think the public sector has to take the lead to show private sector how it can be done, to procure on a much more balanced scorecard basis and procuring for outcomes and value. And that is quite a big challenge, because it's not just about coming up with a system and saying, yeah, this is what we're going to do. It's a behavioural and cultural thing. So procurement's about people. There's people that are responsible for procurement that actually make decisions. And ultimately in the public sector, you know, under what has been ODU regulations to date, and there will be another version of that, no doubt, post when we leave the EU, best value has been unfortunately conflated with lowest price. Yeah. And if we're going to change our industry, we need to get real about the fact that we need to have mechanisms in place that select on a more considered basis, where it's about, you know, wider issues, and that could include not just capex but whole life performance, so defects, energy performance, social value, you know, what kind of job profile are you creating, carbon, you know, all of those things. And I think it's equally an issue in the private sector, where unfortunately private developers and investors, because of pressures on their own business models, have to follow that the system, as it were, and procure in a very different way. And it needs bold leadership, and you know, every so often someone will make that decision and to say, look, we're not just going to procure cheap, we're going to procure the right quality and the right outcomes. And I think it's a massively important thing, particularly for MMC, which in many respects is struggling to compete with traditional build on a capex price basis, when in reality the whole outcome profile of some forms of MMC show a better case for selecting alternative forms of construction.
Killian.
And I agree wholeheartedly with Mark there. And this goes back to planning as well, Darren. And Karen, as you know very well, planning is meant to be blind.
Yeah.
Why the feck does it need to be blind?
Yeah.
So Darren referred to cowboys earlier on, the people that, overpay for the land because they're going to hold it on for 10 years, blah, blah, blah. That we should be much more discriminating in who we give planning to. And on the public procurement, don't tell me what you will do, show me what you have done. And let's come up with a basis where the people doing the procuring, Mark, go and visit the Mount Anvil sites, the Greystar sites, and compare them to some of the other people and say, oh my God, not in a month of Sundays. We're going to go with Greystar, we're going to go with Mount Anvil. We just got to get smarter around that. That's back to collaboration.
Yes.
Communicating better, I think.
Michela, do you?
I'd just like to make a point about Darren's cowboys. I really like that reference because it makes, we talk a lot about it in the build to rent market as the rogue landlords. And I think a lot of times they're called PRS sector, everything gets lumped into one. And, if someone's managing one or a few units as not their full-time job, I don't think that should be compared the same as a professional landlord that is trying to do the right thing, is building high quality, is thinking about the long term, is thinking about sustainability, thinking about the health and well-being of our residents, actually has relationships with our residents. We want them to stay in our homes for the long term. And I think that's a very different thing than cowboys and rogue landlords. It does sometimes feel like we're being, in a way, punished because we're trying to do things the right way. A point on selective licensing. It feels like there should be acknowledgement on build-to-rent operators doing things the right way, that it shouldn't just be kind of a per unit cost, because it feels like we're being penalized. Just small things like that I think could really help acknowledge that they are doing it the right way. That really do care about our residents and our customers and are trying to build communities and work together with them. We want to work collaboratively. I think that's a big message to get out there as well.
That's great.
I like the term cowboys though, Darren. I'm going to use that in the future.
Well, that's what they are. That's what they are. And again, it's about government giving us the right tools, because actually I see the build to rent market as the 21st century equivalent of council building of 100 years ago. Now, there'll be different players in the market. Some of it will be private and some of it will be councils. But councils have to step up and play a much more poignant role. But we also need to have the tools, because rogue landlords only get away with what they get away with because the legislation isn't strong enough for local government to be able to take on what's going on. It can't be right that it costs me more money to take someone to court than what we get back from the call when we're taking them to court. It's a ridiculous situation. Why are we taking them to court? If we're going to a property and that property is not fit for purpose, we should have the powers already to compel them to do that job. That brings the whole marketplace up. At the moment, we have a Dickensian system. It allows the cowboys to get away with it. And it amazes me that we as different sectors allow that to happen. Now, if we can decide what our values are as a sector, which is good quality homes at different price points for rental, then actually we build a better society. And it's not rocket science. They knew this 100 years ago. That's why Greater London, my borough, other parts of the country got built out. Let's start again, can we? Let's show. They did it after the war. We've got to show those values again. And this is the time to do it, when people actually are seeing that society is really important to all of us. Because actually, being selfish has killed people. Those people going out on the streets when being told to socially distance and everything else is actually spreading an illness that killed people. And I have to say, I'd much rather be one of those people that are trying to support the wider society and say everyone has a place in it, even the most disruptive. We've still got to build for them as well. And that's very much our part of that industry. You know, we build for anyone and everyone, but we've got to accept that between us all, we've got to build across the piece, and not just London-centric. We've got to make sure our northern towns, Met cities, but it works for them as well. And we've really got to start dealing with those issues.
Can I just ask then, any of you, but probably Michela first of all, do you still think that we've got to achieve a cultural shift about tenure? That because we've had successive governments, haven't we, of all colours, pressing the, you know, you're a failure if you don't own your own home, and trying to incentivise for first-time buyers and people, whereas actually choice must come into it, and new ways of living in the professional rented sector, community living, are attractive to people. There are all sorts of reasons why people might wish to rent, but it's been stigmatised.
I completely agree. If I could tell you how many times people have said to me, like, oh, you're a renter? And then they look at me with this look on their face and they say, well, when are you going to buy? Like I need to buy in order to achieve success. And I just look at them and say, you know, I choose to be a renter. I love the flexibility that it brings. I love the fact that I'm not encumbered by a property, and I am able to make a change if I need to. That's what I need in my life right now. It's not for everyone. We're not saying, you know, build to rent is the only option. We're just saying it is a good quality option when you choose to rent, when your lifestyle choice is a rental housing choice. Because I think previously there were not good options for quality rental housing. You might get a good landlord, but on the other hand, it might be a terrible experience. So I think I do agree there needs to be more of a cultural shift. I think we've made progress. It felt like we were making a bit more progress several years ago. And then I do feel like we've taken some steps back, especially in planning, especially around the affordable discussion with discount market rent. It does feel like we've gone backwards a bit, and I'd like to try to push that further and make sure that people understand that as build to rent landlords, we can manage discount market rent, and it would be tenure blind, so everyone is experiencing the same levels of service. So I think, you know, we need to kind of regenerate that conversation and have it again. But I do think it's an ongoing education process.
Mark, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so just picking up on the various themes that have been discussed over the last few minutes, I just think there's a fantastic opportunity to pick up on the sort of mood of the public in the country. You know, we clearly have heightened awareness of the role and the debt we owe key workers, and I think that key worker definition is a bit broader than it was perhaps prior to the COVID-19 crisis in terms of who's helped maintain our economy through these tough times. And I think if you think about, you know, this the Homes for Heroes type strapline that's being bandied around, and you know, and Darren knows that there's some work happening at the moment to try and mobilise something a bit more formal about this. But if you can connect a programme of home building aimed at that part of our society that actually spreads a whole diversity of different tenures as well. So it's you know, everything from social rent to affordable rent to intermediate rent to buy, shared ownership, build to rent, discounted market rent, private for sale, complete ownership, all of that, but just aimed at a certain price point in certain geographies. And you combine that with an idea of building it differently through modern methods, modular, whatever it might be. There can be a transformative approach, not only resolving this issue about social inequality, but also transforming construction. And I certainly, in terms of sort of discussions with government and with Homes England, think that is something that if we can unify as a sector from a real estate and a construction perspective, there's a fantastic opportunity to do something that creates a really positive legacy.
And on that really positive note, That's been a fascinating 3/4 of an hour. Thank you so much for those very valuable insights. I think there are real challenges ahead. We thought we were challenged and in crisis before, and I think we've now all got to really think clearly and collaboratively, as you have all said, and try to get to the bottom of what the problems are and find some new solutions together.
Thank you, everyone. Karen, thank you. Absolutely expertly chaired, as I knew it would be. Thank you. Thank you to you all for contributing. I think we found the new government task force for getting us back up to scale for housing delivery. So thank you to all. You covered a lot there, a huge amount in 45 minutes. As I said, we will be uploading today's video onto our YouTube channel, so I'm sure everyone will want to take another look, and please do. Thank you again. Just a very quick mention, as we're just running out of time now. Our next webinar will be next Thursday, and it's going to be an interview with Guy Granger, Chief Exec for EMA Jones Lang LaSalle. He will be talking on an international view of real estate in a COVID-19 world. So that's something to look forward to. And just to mention, Mark Farmer, who obviously on the panel today, he's going to be doing a market insights session shortly on his new report. So thank you, and we look forward to that. So from all of us here, please do keep safe, and thank you from our family to yours.